Hey guys, what's up? This is Evo G here. This is episode 2 of the breakdown that I've been doing where I take past work and I talk about what was going on in my mind when I photographed it, what went into the editing process, and then we go layer by layer and kind of talk about what was going on in my head and how we got to the final image here. So just to dive right into this was shot for Audi Rochester in a totally separate shoot, but then I did a collaboration with the Ministry of CGI, which I'll post a link, and they are a website that you can go on there and select backplates. They have little photo packages where it was a shot of the city, and it was like 14 images or something like that, but it's a bunch of images to select from to make sure you get a shot that is compatible with a composite you plan on working on. And this is a composite, so the car isn't actually there. So we're going to be kind of going through this one. So just to get right in on the car first. So like I said, this was shot in a totally different atmosphere for a totally different image. And that one is actually over here. And I'm not going to break down this image because this was its own thing that turned out to be that. But what I wanted to just snap over here and kind of give you guys a little bit of context on is this is the car right here. It's a matte finish. It's a matte gray. And, didn't really call for me to need to strobe it. So now that you guys seen this, I'm going to close this one out. But this is the car. We basically selected out the car, and we brought it into the new photo. So I'm going to get rid of this one and click back over here. Now we'll work on this layer. So since it was matte paint job, it really cancels reflections out on its own. So I don't have the layer by layer on the car here. It was in an old file that for some reason I can't obtain. But we're gonna go through here, and now that you know that car's from that other photo, and talk about it. And I'll just touch on a couple of little things. There was some issues going from one to the other. Like up here was a telephone pole from the old photo. There were some power lines in the windows. We had a couple of reflections over here of a gas station just creeping into the hood there. And then back in this corner you have more power lines and maybe some cars reflecting into the rear bumper. So we handled those by just a couple of shifts of the circular polarizer I'm using. I'll take like 4 or 5 shots turning that circular polarizer so that I have panels that are polarized, and then I'll piece all of them together. Stuff like up here on the roof that like won't get polarized, like with the telephone pole up there. So what I did was I did a lot of cloning and healing the heel brush and kind of got those things away. Not a lot of airbrushing or using the paintbrush on shots like these, or on a shot like this matte finish, just because the car's already so smooth. It didn't really need much, maybe a tiny bit like over here to blend that reflection and a tiny bit on the hood. But really this, their matte cars tend to be a dream to work with, especially on an overcast day with the sun kind of being softbox. So the wheels were added in later, and we'll see that in this folder here, the HRE folder. So I'm going to click this off, and we'll start here. So I selected this image, and I just thought, since I had already shot the car, it was nice with the Ministry of CGI's website how instead of it like stock images will just give you one photograph. With a website like theirs where they give you photo packages or like a packet, you kind of have a couple of shots to play from. So if you already shot the car, the more shots you have of a location, the merrier. When I go and shoot my own backplates, if I go and shoot a shot like this, I'll like lay down on the ground and shoot a shot, and then I'll kneel, shoot a shot, crouch shooting a shot, then I'll go medium height, high, and then above my head. So I have 5 different perspectives of this shot alone. That way, if I want to utilize a shot that I've shot a while back, I can maybe make that location work. Ideally, you kind of want to do it the other way around. Now that I have this location, you go and shoot the car maybe to this location. That way it will fit a little bit better. But there's ways to get around that with, compiling a ton of backplates, which I have folders and folders of backplates that I've bought and I've shot on my own. So now to get into this a little bit here. So the first things first, I ran it through like a Lightroom or a Camera Raw, basically just changing the color temperature. I didn't want this overall purpley orange cast. I wanted it to be moodier. I wanted it to be more cinematic looking, and I decided to go with this bluish cool tone, knowing that I'm bringing a gray car in, and it's just going to work well to kind of be monochromatic, but it's got these elements of the wheels I was intending to put on it, a little tan and cyan building back there. So that overall got that adjustment. I wanted the ground. A lot of times I like a lot of contrast and detail in my ground, so that's what I did here on this Curve 5 adjustment layer. I just selected. I went around with a pen tool, selected my ground. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time. A lot goes into the selecting because it goes a long way. When you spend a lot of time on selecting, your work starts to come out really polished. So I selected the entire ground around this whole perimeter here, and I basically just darkened it. I did a little S-curve, took my darks, brought it down, took my highlights, brought it up, and yeah. So then this guy I liked it, right? But I had this weird clipping going on here. I didn't like that. I didn't like this fall off over here, and not to mention, I with the light being over here, when I popped the car in there, it didn't make the most sense. So I went and put one of the backgrounds I shot in, the skies that I shot. It was a little bit more muted, and it was a little bit more consistent with a busy background like that. I wanted it to be a little less about the sky, since we had like a little city skyline back there. So now we would plop the car in. And a little bit on this. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but let me get a pen tool out. We're going to touch on the perspective and how I achieve the perspective. So let's just switch this to red, if I can figure it out. Okay. So to touch on the perspective, what I like to do is a lot of times I'll take my canvas size and I'll make the width, 15,000. So I'm not going to get too deep into this, but what you're looking for is where your anchor points on the car are going to cross your horizon line when you're doing a drop in like this. And this does not always, it's not like a key that like always looks correct. And even when I do this guide, it doesn't line up perfectly, or I'll be like, you know what, that's not completely how I want to portray the car, or I think this spot might look a little bit better. So I get it generally close to here, and you'll see I'm off. But basically, you want this. You want that little intersection to be in line with your horizon, and I say that's a starting spot, because then you can see I'm a little bit off, and obviously I'm going through this later. I might have grabbed a different horizon spot, but you typically want those to be close, and then you can go a couple pixels on and off of that just by the eye. Oh, that looks right. That doesn't look right. That looks, because like even if I grab my car right now, you'll see. If it was up here, it changes everything. The car looks like a monster truck. If it was down here, like, you see how weird that looks? So when you find that at least close to that meeting point of your two horizons, or your one horizon matching with the wheels, you got a nice starting point there to get the perspective right. And you got to also kind of keep in mind your focal lengths. Like if you're shooting something at 24 millimeters and then your background shot at 75 or an 80 millimeter, it's gonna look pretty weird. But it could look weird in a good way. Never really tried that, but you could probably somehow make it work. But it's gonna be much, much harder to make it believable. So let's just back up off of all that. And that's just a little bit of perspective. Now we're going to get into the shadow work. So you can see here, I have a layer mask. And in this folder is just the shadow of the car. So I'm going to zoom in. We're not going to worry about the background. The first one is your main shadow. And what I'm doing there is I'm kind of looking at my reference image of my other image. I'm matching the lighting. It's the same sort of lighting situation. So I'm seeing that the shadow was like kind of this soft faded shadow, getting very dark underneath the car since it was a dark overcast kind of blandy day, giving you a smooth shadow like that. So that's what I went for there, and I basically selected that. I feathered it probably like 20 or 15 or something like that, and I made the first shape of my shadow. And then these two layers right here are the shadows underneath the wheels, because you can see the harsh spot there. So the shadow generally looks good, but it shouldn't be that harsh under there. There should be a little fall off shadow like that and like that. You can see I'm clicking them on there, front right here and rear right here. So that's pretty much the start of this image, and this all looks weird still. The windows, see here the power lines I was talking about. So I edited these power lines out later into the edit, and even with the old photo that was for the other shot for Audi Rochester, later into the edit I clean up the car when I'm starting to get near where I want to be on the image. So then this shot, I'm starting to work on the windows, making sure the contrast is right. You obviously see the contrast is off in the original car shot. We have to match that to the new location. So you see that I'm playing a lot with getting these windows right to look believable. And that's selecting them and basically cutting out what was there previously, but then letting like these hue and saturation layers messing with lightness to kind of make it look hazy, like you're really looking through a window there and there's like a film of glass there. Again, stuff like that, it just, you keep messing with it until you get it to look right. You look at a reference image. I looked at the old reference image, and you keep messing with it until it looks right. And in that other one, if it's got this sort of tint or it's making that sort of effect, you try to match that here. So right there you see another little haze, and now we got windows that are really starting to look believable, especially with there being a gradient haze coming from the left. This is bright over here, so we got to kind of match that in that back window. If we didn't, you're left with something like that. So the window needs like 4 or 5 steps to get it to even look right. So you got something like that. Windows can be pretty tricky. They take a little bit of another pair of eyes looking at it and be like, does this look right? Does this not? Sometimes I'll mess with actual gradient maps, like a white one like this. I'll actually get a white gradient map like this, and I'll put it something like that, right? And then I'll just show you guys really quickly. I'll sometimes like select that, cut it, and then now we have this smaller one, right? But then I'll Control T and I'll distort it, or I'll warp it so I can bend it to my window, right? Something like that. So like if I'm working with like a light painted image and I don't know what I want to do with my windows, but I really like one of the images of the windows without it being light painted, you can mess with stuff like this to kind of give that window a sheer or a shine or a shape, kind of give it a wrap into having a fade. But this isn't right here. This is very wrong. Just another idea of how I attack windows on some other images when it calls for it. So then this next layer is dodge layer to building back there. You can see it just slightly, it was getting a little bit too much light for my setting there, that it looks kind of like almost like just a hazy sun almost. Not really a sun, but it's just way brighter than all the other buildings. So I just darkened up just a tad, and then I desaturated it as well. This looks like on the front of the building, it looks like there's almost a blue sky here, so that has to get fixed. There's a lot of blue in these windows, and I don't know if that's the tint or the reflection of these windows, but for the image, it looked wrong once I dropped this new sky in. So basically get rid of it all like that. Add a saturation, add a little bit of curves and contrast to that building, and now it's kind of blending in that monochromatic scene back there. So yeah, so now we're onto a smoke layer. So this is a layer mask of smoke on black, and I'm painting in with a brush, and then I'm changing the colors. So you can see here, when I first added the smoke in right here, it's got a warmer tone to it, and it needs to have a little bit more of a blue tone to it since I changed the color temperature of this background to blue. So you can, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this in YouTube, but if I zoom in here like this, you can see it goes from like a greeny yellow to like a whitish blue almost. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see that. You can really see it down here in like the bushes. Like look right here. You see it's like not allowing the green to come through so much, which was giving this like yellow cast or whatever. So that's what I did there on the left side of the car. Obviously, if I'm going to do that, I got to add it to the right of the car too. So I added a little bit more smoke wisping across the ground there, just to build the atmosphere up a little bit. It's such a vast open parking lot that I wanted to build the atmosphere up. Again, changing this curve layer right here, changing that smoke to be from a yellow to a more of a bluish white. So then on these two layers, you're not going to see these in YouTube. These two are color toning. Sometimes I'll do it through color balance. Sometimes I'll do it through curves. Sometimes I'll do it in Lightroom or Camera Raw. It's really just kind of the type of control changes between all those different tools. And sometimes I like the control using the color balance here. And it's inverted here, so it's only attacking my shadows. And then this one is normal, only attacking the highlights here. And you can see it gets a little bit more blue. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see that on YouTube. It's such a subtle change, but it all goes a long way when you're working towards the final image. So that's all of that so far. So now we're going to be working on the front plate, which is a very small little detail, but I like to do it. So the front plate in which this bracket here. Obviously, I'd rather there be no bracket and let's just see all honeycomb grill, but unfortunately, that's not the case in a lot of states here. So you need to run a front plate, and we basically start with a black layer here. Sorry, the computer's kind of lagging behind a little bit. But so I basically select out that location, I dump black, and I don't just get jet black. What I'll do is, when I have it selected, I'll pick black that's in my scene so that the black matches. Because this would be too black if I were to just paint, straight black in there. And sometimes it will be straight black if you have a black enough area. But yeah, so I selected that license plate, painted black in there. Then I got an R8 logo off of the internet that was just on a white background. It was actually already selected out for me. It was perfect. And I plopped that in there. I used Control T and the distort and warp tool to kind of fit it in there so it looked perspectively correct. And then change the hue and saturation to kind of match my scene. So what I did here on the hue and saturation is I just dumped the lightness down so that my brightest point on the logo didn't look too bright from the rest of the photo, because it almost looked like it just didn't look real. Because the R8 words were brighter than any other point in my image. It didn't make sense. You have to kind of match, let's take, for example, this Audi logo here. That's probably one of the brightest spots in this image. To have this R8 word here, or the R8 letters here, be brighter than that, it wouldn't make sense. So I try to get them on the same playing field as far as highlights go. With that being said, it's on the front bumper, which the front bumper is a little bit more underexposed, so I had to make the R8 a little bit more underexposed to make the license plate seem believable. So that's the plate. So now we have, I believe, cleanup layers. Yep, so this first one is from a little while back. As you go on, you get a more organized system. You can see from the first video I posted, I'm using folders a lot more, and I really suggest you guys use folders as much as possible so you know where things are and what things are. The more organized you can be, the quicker you can be, and the more you can realize what you're doing right and wrong when you can go back and look at those layers. But this right here should be labeled like car rim light or highlight, because that's what's happening here. So on the top roof of the car, it was too bright. So when you come out here, it's really subtle. This works, but it's a little too bright for my liking, especially with this dark cloud kind of coming over the city here. So I just went in and darkened it all up a little bit. Just ran a little brush or a curve layer, darkened it up. It looks rasterized. That's probably why it's unlabeled. And that's what that is. So the next layer is my background cleanup, like the asphalt here. You can see I'm cleaning up a lot of things. Not much in the foreground. The foreground was pretty clean, but over here, you know, I wanted to keep the puddling because I liked the idea of like it looking wet, especially when I'm adding the smoke. But these parking spots, or these half of a parking spots, whatever's left of them, they needed to come out. So those are zipped out. Over here we had even more parking spots and, you know, little tar lines and, you know, whatever, little imperfections in the ground. Also, there was a bike back here that needed to come out. Didn't want that there. I kind of liked, you know, just weird industrial stuff kind of sitting back there, kind of added into this, you know, almost post-apocalyptic look that I went for, even though it's not post-apocalyptic at all. I did same thing here with the roof on layer 14 here. Did the same thing with the roof. My hood started to look a little too bright compared to the rest of my white points in the scene. So I darkened the hood just a little bit, just the highlights in the hood, just a little. Not the shadows, because I don't want my car to get a little bit darker. Just the highlights. So then hue and saturation, it's a little tweak. I can't even visually see what the little tweak is. Sometimes that happens. It looks like something over here. Yeah, it's actually the puddle. I selected the puddle. The puddle was looking a little too blue, and I just desaturated the blue out of it just because I was on a kick of desaturating things. I really wanted a muted tone. So then I darkened the overall image. This was looking a little too flat. I wanted a little bit more drama, especially with the smoke. It started to look a little bit grungier. So we went with a darker contrast overall. And in this layer right here, you can see too, I grabbed a gradient map of just black right here. This one, I made this one. I mean, it's just a transparent black. But then I grabbed this tool and I just dragged from the bottom and created a little fade to black on the bottom of my frame. I really just didn't want the eye traveling down there. There's nothing down there. There's nothing, no details that you need to focus on down there. So I'm trying to push the eye away from the bottom of the frame to the car. So now we are going to get into the HRE folder here, which that was a decision I made later into the file. I wasn't going to do anything like that. And then I said, you know what, I want to play with this since this car was already kind of shot and used. I didn't want it to seem redundant with just a background change. So I tried to make it almost seem like maybe a different car. That way, next to another image, next to the other images I shot back in the day with Audi Rochester, it maybe was like, oh, it's a different car. So I saw it as a good opportunity to kind of just play around with the scales a little bit and get wheels to match in there. So I plopped in a wheel. I kept my old tires, which on a car like this, it just works out well because they run low profile. So I plopped that right in. Luckily, I found these on another R8. I believe they were on another R8. It might have been on a... No, yeah, they were on another R8. That's how I got the brake caliper in there to match Audi. Luckily, usually that doesn't happen. You're pulling from, other makes and models, and sometimes it can get a little funky, but that worked out really well. I found something that was at a similar angle. This is just the wheel's too bright, so on this I'm adding contrast, and I'm adding a little bit of gold flake in there. I'm making the gold a little bit more dramatic, and then doing just a simple S curve on the contrast. And then the same thing, rinse and repeat for the rear wheel. Say that a bunch of times fast, but yeah, so I'm doing the exact same thing. You can see at the end there it's a little desaturated, so I bump down the highlights and darkness of the overall wheel, and then I'm adding a little bit of gold back into the wheel. So, and then here it's just like a cleanup on those little spots I'm seeing on the tires. Really, really small detail, but I don't know, I just didn't want them there. You can see I'm clicking it on and off. It's right here. See, and then there was another one back here. I don't know. A lot of people probably, I don't know if they'll go that extra mile. I just see it as the more little things I do, the cleaner the overall image eventually looks. So when you do 150 things, it starts to really shape it. So we're nearing the end. This is an overall curve layer to not anything but adding red to the seats. You can see they just get a little bump, nice and tasteful, just to let you know there are red seats in there. Off, on, And I didn't want to make it too bright. It would start to look a little unnatural. The scene's already muted. I just wanted you to know that there are red seats in there. And I think the red seats in there play off nicely on the red center caps of the HRE wheel and the caliper on the Audi logo. And yeah, and then the license plate and the little Audi Sport logo there. And yeah, that's it. So a couple more things you can see on the final file. I'll do like one more scan across the car, and you can see I touched up a lot of the little things I missed when I originally working on the cleaning up the layer of the car. Specifically this piece of carbon right here, this little blade, this carbon fiber blade, it's got power lines in it from that shot I showed you guys in the beginning, so that gets photoshopped out like that. And then it was a couple other things as a just a quick scan across the image that get touched up on this layer here. If I click on and off it, you can see there's another tiny shift to adding a little bit of brightness back, because I felt the photo was a little too dark at that point. So this is the final image, and that ends this shot. And very fun to collaborate with the Ministry of CGI. I like doing stuff like this. Like I said, I love to edit. I love Photoshop. I love compositing. So any chance I get, I'm gonna be itching to do it. Ultimately, though, if I can, I'm gonna shoot the car in the location. But like I said, you don't always have the luxury to do that. So this is a situation I had to make work, and I'm glad I could partner up with them for this shot to kind of resample some old work. It kind of make a shot I already have done a brand new shot. So yeah, so if you guys want to just subscribe and like to the video, that would be greatly appreciated. Look forward to working on the next one, which would be episode 3, and I'm trying to roll these out every week, so keep your eyeballs peeled. I'm having a lot of fun doing these. I think everybody that has already followed, and the new followers and everybody that's liking and commenting, it's huge to me. In the comments, ask away if you guys have any questions and stuff like that. I've talked a little bit in the last video in the comments about eventually starting one-on-ones. I'm just trying to figure out an infrastructure or a time and how I want to charge it and whatnot. So if you're interested in that too, it's definitely something I'm thinking about. So yeah, if you guys want to just subscribe and like, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks.